Hello and welcome to episode 35 of the Control Alt Defense podcast, your favorite military podcast where Vishnu and I toss together the big story when it comes to the Indian military, weapons, defense deals. And it has been an incredible week because the Rafale deal, which has been something that's been on the table for the last many months, we couldn't believe it. NDTV broke the story that it was going to be cleared this week, and on cue, it was cleared on Thursday. So this podcast is being recorded on Friday. You'll be listening to it at this time on Saturday. But what a week it has been as far as the Rafale is concerned. There are a couple of other things that Vishnu and I have been tossing around, which is related to this because we can never get too far away from Operation Sindur. But a report from Switzerland has gone into unprecedented detail as to the achievements of the Air Force during Operation Sindur, more than what we had thought and what we had reported so far. So these two big things are going to be discussed threadbare today on Control All Defense. Vishnu, let's start off with the deal itself. I know our viewers and listeners are going to say, you guys have talked so much about the Rafale, but we have to do it because this is 3.25 lakh crores. That's easily the single biggest defense deal India will ever sign. R.K. Singh, the defense secretary, has told the both of us that this deal is going to be signed this year, within this calendar year. I'm presuming it's going to be far sooner than that. The French president is here very soon. This is by all means really, really big, Vishnu, the fact that it's going through and so quickly.
We spent a lifetime covering this beat.
Yeah.
And now finally, after how many years, right? It was in the early 2000s that Dassault pitched the Mirage 2005.
Just after Kargil, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And now in 2026 is when, the Air Force is getting what it wants. But this is just nuts because it's so important to go through this timeline for our viewers. It's much more than that. In fact, it started in 2001 and now we are in 2026. What the Air Force wanted in 2001 in terms of capability and numbers, not just capability in numbers, it is likely getting with the contract after 2026. It's not happening this year. It'll take years for the planes to come, but at least it's down. Okay, think about it. 2001, the MRCA, multi-role combat aircraft process began. India wanted 126 jets. In 2004, they scratched their heads and say, no, but then, we can't be just single jet. It must be maybe dual jet is a dual engine. Single engine it's not worth getting single engine. Maybe we should look at dual engine as well. That was 2004. 3 years it took them to reach that decision at the Air Force level. I cannot believe that it took them 3 years to figure out that, we need to allow twin engine competitors. Then from 2004 to 2015, 11 years gone down the Yamuna. The original MMRCA tender was officially withdrawn, gone, khalas, right? After all, what started in 2001 ended in 2015 for the MMRCA process. Then in 2016, a year later, we signed on for 36 Rafales. Then it went crazy over here, became Chaukidar Chor hai, went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said there was no corruption. Finally, the planes started arriving in 2018, but only 36 of them, right? Only 36 of them. Remember, 126 is what they wanted. In between, the good news last year, frankly, a little bit out of nowhere, the Air Force got 26 Rafale Marine signed like this. I'm
Maybe.
like, this cannot be as fast as this. This is unreal, but it happened. Then finally, on the 12th of February, right, we've got that 114 deal. Acceptance of necessity, it's not the deal, but believe us, it will be the deal, right? So it just goes to show how daft the entire process is. If your Air Force has said all along from 2001 onwards, I need 126 planes, fortunately they're getting more, than 126. Why deny them this entire process? They've said every chief after chief after chief. Economy growing at 9%, 8%, 7%. Capability of our adversaries, China and Pakistan, growing exponentially. You sat on the file. It's unbelievable. And now finally in 2026, oh, you know what? You were right all along. Let's give you the planes that you seek. It needed an op Sindur. It needed a war between India and Pakistan for our boffins to get this into their head that without this capability, you are done for.
Which means you've had the latter half of the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government, the entirety of the UPA government, two terms and then some of the Modi government, equivalent to a quarter century, Vishnu. And it's very compelling when you put it like that. For the Indian Air Force to get acceptance of necessity
25 years.
for the second or third time, 25 years, quarter century.
25 years. Quarter century.
It's very humbling to stand in front of the mountain of this 25 years and talk about this right now. But it's scary. It's daunting. I have a couple more examples of this, which I'm going to come to. But RK Singh, I notice, has just spoken once again. And first of all, we should acknowledge RK Singh as Defense Secretary, one of the most proactive, transparent,
Absolutely transparent.
persons I have ever met.
He doesn't-
And we come from a beat, Vishnu.
Yeah, where
the defense
people don't
beat,
speak.
Where defense secretary has always been like this distant, unapproachable bureaucrat you can never speak to. And here's this guy who is, very, very professional,
And
believes in
direct in his answers.
transparency.
Direct in his answers. You ask him, no, this is what we're looking at. Is this deal happening? No, it's not. It's going to take some more time. He's not sort of couching it in this word or that word and this, that, and the other. You ask him a question, he frowns for a second and then gives you a really positive, straight answer. Yeah. And at the end of the day, if we can't have transparency in multi-billion dollar, in communicating multi-billion dollar deals, then we are in trouble. Yeah. And so hats off to him for getting this process happening. Because the other part of it is that people get scared in our system, right? The Congress raised all these issues on corruption in the Rafale deal. Our entire system, the defense ministry, at various level of the Babu, they were stuck into this paralysis. Like, what do we do? What happens now? Do we move it or do we not? Ultimately, Manohar Parrikar moved that file. It went to the Supreme Court in a unanimous verdict. There wasn't just one judge. They all said there is no corruption. Carry on with this, right? But we are now, post that experience, hopefully driving through defense deals. And if there is corruption in a defense deal, whether the deal is worth 10 rupees or it is worth $3.5 billion or $35 billion, I should say, let that person be punished. Let that group be punished. But why deny yourself a weapon in the fear that there may be corruption? If there is corruption, deal with it. It's just defensive, scary thinking. And just look at what the Chinese are doing. They are developing at such a, and people say sometimes that, Vishnu and Shiv are just exaggerating all of this. We are exaggerating nothing. We know only a fraction of what China is up to in air power alone, right? And the phenomenal development and deployment of 200 plus J-20 stealth fighters, 200 plus, all right, already gone, it's already deployed. Besides their iterations of the Su-30, which are more advanced than ours, right? Besides their 6th generation tech, which is now flying in multiple variants, they'll home in on designs, maybe they'll take all of them. And all we've managed to do now is get a plane, right, on a piece of paper we are signing up, hopefully, that we wanted 25 years ago. Okay, it was the Mirage 2000 then, fair enough. But, it was capability, which we are getting at this stage. It's unbelievable. How are we going to win wars in the future? Wars are won by air power. And it needed an op Sindur to get our people to think that, okay, no, I don't have a choice. Increase the defense budget.
Vishnu and I, Vishnu was on my show last night where we did explore this theme just a little bit about how things have changed. Vishnu, this is not a small thing. You touch upon it. The fact that the Rafale was insinuated to be part of some larger scam and international corruption and commissions would have normally sent the Rafale into a blacklist file permanently.
Yeah.
Most of us thought that after what happened in 2019, courtesy Rahul Gandhi and some sections of the Congress party, 36 is all the Rafales that the Indian Air Force was ever going to get.
Token.
Like a token Rafale. And now the Air Force would have to look for some other aircraft because, nobody in their right minds in India or the India that we knew would ever want to touch something that was radioactive having, experienced the stench of allegations before. We've seen it with Bofors, we've seen it with the HDW submarines, we've seen it with, so many other, German companies, Italian companies. We've seen it over and over again. And like you rightly said, it's always been the customer, the armed forces that have suffered. Manohar Parrikar sort of switched that mindset on its head, and this government ran with it. And that's why we're seeing this deal actually being signed. It's incredible.
And
Unthinkable almost.
what this also means, and it just struck me, Shiv, just think, in another a couple of years from now, when these planes start rolling in, let us say even 5, 6, 7 years, when the large number of these have been delivered, a young pilot joining the Air Force as a fighter pilot goes from Hawks into a Rafale, into a Su-30, which will be upgraded, right? Into a Tejas Mark 1A or a Tejas Mark 2. I'm not talking about AMCA, that's going to take more time. As opposed to what we have been suffering for so long, where a young pilot goes into MiG-21s, 23s, 27s, 29s, right? Jaguars. These are all planes of dated technology, dated vintage. We can keep telling ourselves that these are current because we've upgraded them. That was a jugaad solution at its best. Even the Mirage 2000, it's dated. It's a great platform, did well in Op Sindur, I can tell you that. But in a few years from now, it's going to have to be replaced. So finally, a young 21-year-old isn't going to be in the cockpit of a MiG-21 trying to land at 350 kilometers per hour, because that is the design of the platform. He or she will be flying a Rafale, right? They're already young pilots into the Rafale formations, but that's a huge jump for us as a country. And I dare say this alone is not enough. We have to get that Tejas Mark II happening. And ultimately the AMCA. The AMCA conversation we've had an episode on. We'll talk about it later on.
I want to come to the center point of today's podcast, which is, we couldn't dodge the Rafale on this episode, obviously, because of the, deal being cleared at the MOD level, Vishnu. But, at some point of time, we've got to address the gorilla in the room, which is that the Rafale is the most advanced fighter we have in our inventory right now. We don't have a stealth fighter. Multiple episodes that Vishnu and I have done on India's lack of a stealth fighter. You can go and see those in the show notes. But Vishnu, the J-20, which you referred to, which is China's sort of the Rolls Royce of the Chinese Air Force at this point of time, at least. They've got more things in the pipeline, but right now it's its most advanced fighter. I want to put these two against each other. Air wars don't typically happen this way, of course. They are far more complex, as you've covered and I've covered. But if we had to compare the Rafale with the J-20 as we know it right now,
Shiv. Great question.
what would that look like? And that's going to be the headline of today's podcast.
It's going to be a really tough fight because the Chinese will be relying on the stealth characteristics of the J-20. But remember, the J-20 isn't, by and large, because I think they're tinkering with the design also, but for the moment, it's not an all-aspect stealth fighter. So it's not in the class of, let's say, the F-22, by no means. Not in the class of the old F-117 either. It's not stealthy in its rear aspect. It's got the Chinese have got their own engines coming online. So it's got a very prominent signature from the back, from the rear. It's not got, it's an engine exhaust which is tailored for, bringing down its stealth or reducing its radar profile. So a smart Indian Air Force operator or operators within a grid and using state-of-the-art radars which can detect stealth, which is another area we need to get into, would or should have, along with real-time satellite imagery, an idea of when these platforms are taking off. You then, relying on what I presume are the considerably superior avionics of the Rafale, you should be in a position to actually start taking them on effectively. Remember, the Rafale, and they don't talk about this enough, is not a stealth aircraft, but it's got stealth characteristics. It's designed in a way, and it's got radar absorbing paint as well, where its own radar signature, while not that of a stealth aircraft, is very low. So it's not as if it can be picked up as easily as the Chinese would hope for. Now, assuming we build a network of sensors on the ground and in the air and satellites, where we are able to real-time figure out the deployment in the skies of J-20s, then the Rafale is in there with a fight, because I believe from everything that I've read that the technology is state of the art. The RB2 radar will now be upgraded. The versions of the Rafale we are getting, we operate something called the F3I. That will ultimately be upgraded to either the F4 and the F5 standard. The F5 standard, which might be the ultimate avatar of the Rafale, incorporates a loyal wingman, which means that the Rafale is a mothership. There'll be autonomous platforms which are being guided by that Rafale. Those would be stealthy, and therefore the Rafale's role and its deployment in operations would be separate. So the J-20 threat would be countered using autonomous drones or semi-autonomous drones as well. Those drones might actually A, be expendable, B, be armed themselves with air-to-air missiles. The Spectra suite of the Rafale, which is its shield and which protects it from incoming threats of surface-to-air missiles and air-to-air missiles, and is state-of-the-art, and I can tell you did tremendously well during Ops Sindur, will be upgraded more. It confuses incoming missiles. It confuses. It jams across various spectrums. It auto deploys chaff and flares, and it's a sensor suite which actually gives the Rafale a really good edge. So therefore, the assumption that Chinese air-to-air missiles are going to knock down every Rafale is not correct. And if in the scheme of things, India's own, and I'm not talking about the Meteor, I'm talking about India's own solid-fueled ducted ramjet air-to-air missile, which is the future, which presumably with a range of 400 kilometers plus, fires against a Chinese platform, it's game on. It would have been better for us if we had an AMCA with the same capabilities I have referred to take on a Chinese fifth or sixth generation platform. It would have been a more even fight. This fight is going to be a tough fight, even with the most advanced variant of the Rafale for the Indian Air Force, given that stealth cannot be denied as a massive advance in aviation technology.
So, but that, correct me if I'm wrong in that case, in terms of this interpretation, then what is the point of the stealth of the Chinese fighter then? If that isn't going to be its sort of game changing advantage when it goes up against something like a Rafale, which is not a purpose built stealth aircraft?
Well, they would argue that it is still a game changer simply because by the time it is detected, it's much closer to the Rafale, giving our pilots very little reaction time in maneuvering, in launching, in sharing targeting data within the formation and then firing. That's what stealth does. It's not that stealth is stealthy all along. A stealth platform at a lower range to the Rafale will likely be picked up given the software advances and the capability of the RBE2 radar. What you actually want is the ability to track it at ranges beyond 300 kilometers, right? 350 kilometers. That may not be possible because the radar return is very small, which is why you need to rely on collaborative detection. Once you do that and you've got radars on the ground which are capable of detecting stealth, and that technology itself evolves over a period of time, real-time satellite intelligence, then you've got a picture of the deployment of these aircraft. And these sensors can then tell the shooters, which are Rafales potentially, that look, this is what's happening. And even if they haven't detected the J-20s themselves, they can actually use targeting data from elsewhere and start doing this. Critical, absolutely critical, is the development of ultra long-range air-to-air missiles. The scary thing that Ops Sindur has shown us is that even missiles of the caliber of the Mika, which is the primary air-to-air missile of the Rafale and the Mirage 2000, super missile, super versatile, has a robust range, not quite up to 100 kilometers. It's outdated because it's just range, which matters at this stage. Therefore, we need to get the Meteor, it is inducted, but we need to get the Meteor as a primary weapon. We need to look at future variants of the Meteor and our own missiles, because we are making a lot of progress. And I'm not talking about Astra or Astra 2. I'm talking about, this solid fuel ducted ramjet weapon which we've tested. That is a future air-to-air missile. It's our missile. That has to be integrated onto the Rafale, and the French better agree about it.
How long in your view, is it going to take for the solid fuel ducted
No,
ramjet
another 5 years you
tech to
should
become?
be. Another 5 years you should be moving from prototype to actual capability testing.
So that would be an Astra 3 potentially then.
I think they're going to give it a different
Different
name.
name.
I think Astra 2 is going to be, a missile which closes in on the 200-kilometer mark. What one of the chief test pilots at HAL actually indicated recently in a tweet was that Astra 1 is reaching really robust ranges. So, of course, I did the right thing and I called up and said, how far do you fly it? He says, yeah, you ask these questions with such, and knowing fully well you'll never get an answer. So, obviously, I
Yeah.
didn't get an,
Yeah,
get an
yeah.
answer. But it was a very robust range. So, you've got that. Rocketry is so important. Air-to-air missiles, everybody keeps talking about seekers, this jamming, etc. But the basic rocketry, that's where it's at.
Kinetic energy, yeah, absolutely. No, and recently there was an SFDR test as well that was
And which went
conducted
off successfully.
successfully. It's a very very promising technology and program that I completely agree with Vishnu. That's where your range battle is going to become really really decisive. Vishnu, it's interesting, this whole soft stealth uh, push by Dassault for the Rafale was actually part of their advertising. I remember,
Yeah.
when they used to pitch the Rafale.
That's true. Yeah, they did
They
mention it.
pitched it against the F-35 for a long time. The Rafale's advertising for many years, I remember, was uh, quite aggressively confrontational with Lockheed on the F-35.
Even for sales to countries like Canada potentially and European partners, they said that no, we are better.
Yeah, saying
But the Swedes also said they're better. The Swedes are still competing with the F-35 for the big Canada contract.
yeah, that's right. And it was.
I feel bad for the Gripen, man.
It was.
It got left out of this
That's an
entire
aircraft
process.
that hasn't gotten its due for sure. I completely agree with that. But I would just say, to close the loop on this stealth aspect, is that Dassault Aviation, the maker of the Rafale, has frequently pitched the Rafale to customers saying, why are you even looking at the F-35 at all this additional cost? And it's not like the Rafale is cheap. It's very expensive, right? But basically saying, don't buy into all of that. The Rafale, like you said, has all the stealth that you're going to need in any kind of battle scenario. So it's interesting that we talk about the J-20 because that's where I'm guessing this kind of soft stealth is applicable.
No, 100%. It is against platforms like the J-20, but the Chinese have got different aces up their sleeves as well. I mean, if you look at their 6th-generation platforms, one of them is huge, which is why it's unlikely to be forward deployed. So therefore, if you've got platforms as large as that, there's a strong possibility that, they would be deploying large weapons at great ranges. So you won't necessarily be engaging them at ranges which work with your missiles. The technology is evolving so fast. It's like AI, except this is actual engineering of physical solutions. But that's scary. But, I wanted to talk a little bit, Shiv, about the Swiss report because, our friends across the border keep saying that, they've annihilated India in Ops Sindur and that, and then they produce all these satellite pictures which are just, I'm allowed to say,
Yeah.
it's just rubbish because Damien Simon has debunked pretty much all of them. Right? Saying that, you're pulling out old
He's still
pictures
debunking them now.
Oh,
by
he
the
is,
way.
yeah. Because that's now become a full-time job. That's nuts. But there's a very credible Swiss think tank which has come out. It's the Switzerland-based Center for Military History and Perspective Studies, CHPM. I've gone through that report very, very closely. I've looked at the credibility of the authors of that report, and their conclusions on Ops Sindur, I'm relieved to say, are exactly mine. Because in as much as we get information, we always as journalists keep asking ourselves that, are we right? Are we wrong? We're relying on Indian sources. There's an inherent bias over there. Who truly is international and global and credible? And these people are. Just look at them. I mean, you've got a fighter pilot over there. You've got strategists over there. It's a great report. And it says this, that by the 10th of May, 2025, remember, Ops Sindur was between the 7th of May and the 10th of May. By the 10th of May, the Indian Air Force pretty much won it. They were on the ascendancy. They could do pretty much what they wanted. Yeah. My book talks about that as well. And, in great detail about what the IAF could do on the 10th of May. And so Pakistan essentially lost the air battle. They lost Ops Sindur. on the 10th of May. And because of the strikes, when the Indian Air and it the Pakistani attacks on the 7th, was sophisticated attacks. Their defense was sophisticated. Their deployment of drones subsequently is sophisticated. We were able to handle that drone threat very successfully because of the engagement of surface-to-air missiles. Again, that's something that's out in a great deal of detail in my book. And jamming. And nobody talks about jamming, and the system won't talk about jamming. But Pakistan's drones were jammed to the ground massively in areas where they tried to sort of hit. This piece sort of outlines the success of jamming, and it pretty much says that it was game over for the. I mean, think about it. Rahim Yar Khan, Noor Khan, Sakkar, Bholari, Jacobabad, all of them were hit. They were smashed. There were holes in the runways. I mean, that was huge. So, another key point, and before I which I'd like to make, is that there's something called shaping operations. It happens in any ground war, air war, whatever it is. We were doing shaping operations by targeting Pakistan's long-range, radars and their surface-to-air missile units. So you are carving out areas from where the Pakistanis can't see you at all. It was the successful operations to take out Pasroor and Chunya and the air search radars, ground-based, including possible American radars, very good ones, that actually gave the Indian Air Force the ability to just carve into the targets that they wanted to by the 10th, because the Pakistanis weren't quite seeing us in the way that they perhaps saw us on the 7th. So the outcome of this is not in dispute. I mean, we know that.
Yeah.
We know that for different factors. But, here's an independent assessment.
More forensic also.
Which is, which really says the same thing. So our surface-to-air missiles work. So India's defensives, India's Rahul Dravid worked, in that sense. But by the 10th, we were on a roll. And, I've spoken to so many officers at very senior levels, and this finds mentioned in my book as well. By the 10th, we could do whatever we wanted. Pakistan's air power was degraded to a point where they had lost the initiative, which was clearly in our favor, and the IAF was on the ascendancy. This is the way the IAF always behaves. If you look at, and Shekhar Gupta has actually done a wonderful podcast on this. If you look at the 1971 war, if you look at the stats, India lost a disproportionately high number of aircraft in the East Pakistan theatre. Who won that war? Right. So I am not for a second, and just so that our Pakistani friends don't take my comments but they still will.
They still will. Oh,
Yeah.
that's okay.
I'm not talking about losses suffered by India, but if we are on the theme of losses, Donald Trump just a couple of days back tweeted that there have been 10 planes lost in Op Sindur. I can assure people over here that the IAF did not lose 10 planes. Whatever the IAF lost, they didn't lose 10 planes. So guess what? If it wasn't the IAF that lost 10 planes, then you've got Trump, the US president, for the first time referring to planes being shot down of the Pakistan Air Force, which is a fact.
Yeah.
It is a fact. You can read all about it. There are detailed radar, there's a detailed analysis of radars which the IAF has done. They kept quiet about it for a long time before they actually said, may as well talk about it. We went and shot on this, that, and the other. And again, there is so much of that in my book on the actual interceptions, surface-to-air missile-based.
Something that happened in Kargil, Vishnu, reminded me of a question that I have now, and I wanted to ask you this actually. And I've been talking about it with my friends in France as well as in the Air Force, which is that after Kargil, which you covered personally, the Bofors guns were used in direct firing mode, like pistols practically.
I saw that.
You've seen it.
Insane.
You've seen it, right?
In the
It's an
Batalik
incredible
sector.
sight.
Yeah.
They'd never been used in that way before, and on the contrary, traditional gunnery wisdom was don't use them like that because they are not useful in that way. But the Indian Army proved Bofors wrong. The Swedish Army in Bofors, in fact, had come down after that to learn a little bit more. And when I visited Sweden, Karlskoga, where Bofors is based in 2005, I remember going to their research unit, the Bofors research unit, and there were pictures of the Bofors guns in Kargil everywhere. It was like their biggest inspiration because they learned about what those guns could do thanks to how the Indian Armed Forces used them. Similarly, with the Rafale. similarly with the Rafale, uh, I am very curious about the threat libraries and the mission profiles and whatever else the Indian Air Force has been able to generate by using the Rafales during Operation Sindur, and I'm sure the French are very curious about it.
And
There
that
is a degree
PL-15 on the ground.
there is a degree of osmosis that happens between the air forces whenever they use the same kind of aircraft because it's useful. You know, what did you learn about the aircraft? And I know for a fact that the Indian armed forces will always show you something you can do with a piece of equipment that the makers and the original
Had no
customers
idea about.
had no idea about and had not intended also. I'm wondering what those could possibly be with the Rafale.
No, I think the threat library of Spectra would certainly go up. It would include the signatures of the PL-15, presumably, with the research that India has done on the PL-15, because we found at least one of them on the ground fairly intact. You have a great idea of what that missile is all about. So you would learn about its propulsion system, the chemicals used, the fuels which are used. How does it get its rail range? What about its ASA, Sika, etc., etc.? All of that is being shared with your closest allies. You can bet your bottom dollar. You had a tap on the shoulder from America and France and the others and saying, so, like, what did you guys find? And can you pass
Send photos.
send photos? In boarding school, we used to say, can you pass me some tuck? Like, can I have? I mean, so they would have been.
Clearly, they've shared information.
Yeah, they've shared, and they would have shared. It's in collective interest.
No, correct. With that PL, where
But
is
they
that?
have some scary missile called the PL-17 now.
Where is that PL-15 now?
Not the Pakistanis, the Chinese.
Where have they kept that PL-15? Where have our guys kept that PL-15?
They've dismantled it, presumably. They've sort of understood it. They've chemically sort of checked it out. They've checked out this thing.
Of
A
course.
bunch of guys on a table like, right? I don't think you can put that back together again. It's not Humpty Dumpty.
Yeah. No, of course. Yeah, and RK Singh, the defense secretary who we were talking about just a moment ago, he's provided some more details about the Rafale deal as well, which is that, they're aiming at about like a 40, 50, 60% indigenization, which is a very ambitious.
See, that's all the tough part.
That's the tough part. That is where this thing really has the potential to go off the rails. It won't, because we've got good companies that are going to be executing it. But he says 3.5 years to first, 2028 is when the first naval Rafales will be delivered. 26 aircraft. Few years after that, the first flyaway Indian Air Force Rafales will start arriving of part of this deal. And then you've got like a long, difficult decade in front of us before the made in India Rafales, as it were, will begin to come online. But as far as the Rafale is concerned, Vishnu, by the time these new Rafales come, the Indian Air Force would have had a lot more experience in these aircraft. They've already had Operation Sindur.
And the existing ones, plug and play. The upgrade is not going to be like a crazy issue. It's not like going from Tejas Mark 1 to Tejas Mark 1A, where people are like, oh my God, how do we implement all of these changes? It's essentially plug and play. It's software driven, some key hardware changes, but again, plug and play.
Yeah.
So that's going to actually improve things a great deal going forward. Man, it's got a lot of capability coming in now. Yeah. Thank God we increased our defense budget. It was as a percentage of GDP, it was where we were in the 1962 war.
Yeah.
Now finally we've got something to talk about. It's huge. And just so that we are clear about this, there's still a bit of a process as far as Rafale is concerned. It's an acceptance of necessity. There'll be a price negotiating committee. They have a rough price in mind. They'll negotiate it. They'll talk about tech. But I think the fact that they've gone ahead and named Rafale means all the other competitors are out. And as you mentioned, a couple of months. So I think 6 months to a year. Yeah. That's my personal.
Since you mentioned the Tejas Mark 1A, there have been some heated discussions online, pertaining to waivers, and we've seen some of our friends jousting around on social media on this.
I know.
They've
been firing meteors at each other.
Yeah, they've been firing meteors at each other, and about
They're
why,
all friends, by the way.
about why these waivers are provided with such alacrity to foreign suppliers and not to our own aircraft. That's for an entirely different episode. We'll actually try and get some of those people onto our podcast and have a Oh, we should. Angad and Indranil and Mao and all these people. We'll get them on. I promise you. We'll get them all onto our podcast. And, they've been very kind. They've been posting about the podcast and complimenting us for the previous episode as well. So we really appreciate that, because these are people who are, they are way beyond just defense aficionados. These are people who have incredible insight and knowledge about the way things actually work. So it's actually really nice to see these engaging heated discussions, because they're substantive. It's not
One of the gentlemen you just mentioned shot down a Sukhoi flying, you know what? A Sea Harrier.
Sea Harrier, right? Yeah, I know that story. I've written about it too.
You have?
Yeah, I have.
That's shocking, Shiv.
But without any of the specifics involved. But yes, I have. But I promise that we will get some of those people on this podcast, because we keep getting those requests as well, Vishnu. Before we come to a close to this episode, uh, another deal that was cleared, Vishnu, alongside the Rafale, was the P8I deal for 6 more. We've already got 12. Um, I just before we began recording this, I checked. Initial clearance for this deal came 7 years ago, because the Indian Navy had said, "Look, we love these aircraft. We want more of these aircraft.
What's there not to love? It's the finest platform on earth.
We need more of these aircraft for sure, given how much the Indian Navy is having to do in the Indian Ocean. We don't want a repeat of the C-17, screw up with the
So you'll
Indian
end
Air
up
Force.
with, we have 12 presently, right?
So this will make it 18.
Yeah, it's like the size of a small airline. You take off all the stuff inside, put seats, and we can have Vayudut once again.
The Indian Navy wants 30. This would make it 18. It wants 30 ultimately. That's the figure that they have in mind. But
Superb aircraft.
yeah,
I mean, unbelievable
it
capability.
still took 7 years though, and these aircraft have been doing more than your over ocean surveillance and submarine hunting.
Yeah, they did Doklam surveillance and Ladakh surveillance.
Ladakh surveillance. They frequently do over land surveillance, which is another piece of jugaad. I'm assuming the Indian Navy has figured out land how to use these aircraft over land as well. So it's quite something.
We're going to talk about that soon, but should I close out the bulletin?
Do it.
Look, it's been I promise you we won't be doing more Rafale bulletins for some time, but there's a lot more to talk about, and but it is huge. And Shiv and I argued saying that another Rafale this thing, but just look at what I said. 25 years it's taken for the Indian Air Force to get to this stage. So I do believe that it was warranted, this particular episode. And that link to that Swiss report was important. Why? Because it was a Rafale which, among other platforms, fought in Op Sindur. We're buying more Rafales. The government has vouched for it. And that report says that India came out on top. It came out on top to a significant reason. One of the significant reasons was that Rafale aircraft. We'll leave it there. Thanks very much. We'll be back next week. Bye.
See you soon.